It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. Today I have the pleasure of talking to Alderman DaJuan Gay. He represents Ward 6 in our fine city of Annapolis. For those that don't know, DaJuan is a graduate of Annapolis High School, class of 2015. He continued his education on the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. In 2019, Alderman Gay won a write-in campaign at age 22 to become the youngest city council member in the history of Annapolis. Thank you for joining me today, Alderman Gay.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you giving me this time.
When did that moment happen for you that I have to run for city council? I have to go into politics?
I started to really get into politics, and I tell this story all the time, and I say it's so cliche, but we stayed home from school when Barack Obama was sworn in. And for some reason, that stuck with me forever. I remember the apartment. It was when we were living in Admiral Oaks, just off of Admiral Drive. And it was, we first had moved to the city of Annapolis. And I've seen this black man be sworn in as president of the United States. And I was like, wow, I like this. And so I went to Bates Middle School. I had a history teacher. His name was Hartman. I'm still good friends with him today. And he really he brought politics and history to life in the classroom, and I fell in love with it. I just knew that I wanted to do something like that. And before I even got involved in politics, I really wanted to be superintendent of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. That was my thing all the way up until graduation because I was passionate about education, still am, but I just thought that's what I was going to do. And then I got to Slippery Rock University in my freshman year. They said if you want to do this teaching course, you have to take, I think it was like 8 math courses, and I was like, okay, I'm out.
Sounds a lot like why many of us went into journalism.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not a math person, but I loved politics, and I loved government, and I love fighting for people. So I switched to a political science degree at Slippery Rock University, and it's been kind of that way ever since.
You did go to University of Maryland Eastern Shore, though.
I did, yeah. I transferred from Slippery Rock University to Anne Arundel Community College, and from the community college, I thought, well, I want to go, I want to live on campus. I want to be far, but not too far from home. What's the furthest college in Maryland? It's University of Maryland Eastern Shore, well, an HBCU. So I went there, and I'm still working on getting my degree and trying to balance that with the city council.
It's a lot of stuff going on in your life.
Yeah, it's been, initially I thought that you could do the 12 courses and do the city council. But what I found that is that if you really care about the job and if that the issues are what what could drive you, it's a full-time thing. Because, people will call you at 12 a.m., they will email you at 2 a.m., text you, and I feel obligated to respond. And so it's a full-time job, and I love it because the solutions and helping people, whether it be in my ward or outside of my ward, is satisfying.
All right. Now, I asked you a question before the interview started to make sure you were okay with talking about this. But maybe part of that full-time job, all this stuff that's going on, and this is a moment in time we will never forget. On June 20th at 4:20 a.m., you posted on Facebook, "I haven't slept since 1:34 a.m., just being honest about the other side of anxiety and mental health issues. I started to realize these changes over 2 years ago. My worry is for children who have these symptoms but aren't sure how to receive the appropriate help. If something doesn't feel right, say something." Alderman Gay, are you okay? Have you said something? Have you gotten treatment?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. But I think that what's important is that, if you are, I think as someone who is older, I'm not an adult. Well, I'm an adult, but I'm 23. I still got a lot to learn, and I realize that every day being on the council. So that, if you're someone that's older or a young adult, and you are able to communicate how you feel mentally, I think you are obligated to do so because of as you mentioned, so many things are going on in this world, and it sucks that we lose so many people at such a young age because they aren't able to communicate them or express their feelings. And I think that, also it falls upon me representing my ward and majority African-American communities that are impoverished, and mental health being such a huge issue. And I think that, just speaking on that and me mentioning it to the public is also holding me to the same standard because, for me, it's never easy, to talk about mental health. That's never an easy thing because you don't want people to think you are incapable of doing any job, but you also want to receive the appropriate care so that you're well. And I just want people to know that it's okay to do both. So I don't know. I feel obligated to do that if that's some issue that I kind of stick myself to.
I think that's very smart. Have you gotten help yourself?
So I've looked into it. I haven't necessarily. I don't know which route to take, and that's also a part of educating myself on mental health and seeing what options are available because we always hear about therapy, and I think therapy is. But I think that there are steps far beyond that, and so I think that's important too. And those resources are available. So I'm open to looking at a number of things, and I would hope that everyone who is listening is open to a number of things to help themselves.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm speaking to Alderman DaJuan Gay, who represents Ward 6 in the city of Annapolis. We just covered a lot of ground there with biographical information and DaJuan posting that he had some anxiety and mental health issues, and he thinks that it's okay to talk about them. And I agree, it's okay to talk about them. Getting help is a necessary thing. Suggestions? Do you want suggestions from our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always open to that, and I'm open to conversation as well. That's important.
As you are well aware, we are having quite the moment in our history. We're seeing history unfold before our very eyes. I hope a lot of things change, but there's a lot of things that need changing. On June 14th, a friend of yours, Harold Mo Lloyd, posted on Facebook, he was with you and 3 others, when you were walking through President Point, enjoying a beautiful view. He said, as we walked back to our respective communities, a polite police officer pulled us to the side and informed us about a racist complaint. A brief summary of the complaint said 4 African-American juveniles are in our neighborhood and we would like them to move along. President Point has signs up posted, no trespassing, private property. It is a waterfront community in Annapolis. Do you think you were racially profiled, and what do you think the solution is to stop all these Facebook Karens of the world?
Before I answer the first question, I just want to start with, a similar story so that I'm not putting out conflicting views. Another individual who I met at a march, he said, what was so funny to me and what struck me when I seen the post on Facebook was that me and my partner were walking, and it was the first time that we had ever walked down this street, and we walked through President's Point. We went out on to the trail, and we were not stopped at all. In fact, we were greeted, and he said, I thought that it was a great opportunity. I found a new space in Annapolis, and then I got home and seen that post less than 4 hours later. So, yes, I do think that there was some sort of racial profiling because, and as you've seen on the post, many have stated that they have walked through the neighborhood and they have not had the cops called on them.
I've seen people say they were stopped. I've seen other people say they weren't stopped.
Well, yeah, I think that the difference in our situation was that we were stopped by the police. Many of the comments were a neighbor came down and said, hey, this is private property, or someone walking mentioned to us that this was private property. They didn't say that someone from their balcony called the police on them and asked that they move along. And, we had no problem with doing so. We were already walking out of the neighborhood. We had not sat down or made it a picnic or anything like that. It literally was just following the trail in and out of the neighborhood.
The solution would have been so-called Facebook Karen, right? That's the new name, to engage in some conversation and say, hey, I'm a resident, just wanted to find out, hello, how are you? This is private property, rather than calling the police. Yes?
Yeah, I think that that's appropriate. And I think that just escalates things. If we were, committing crimes, if you had seen something strange, then absolutely, that's what law enforcement is for, and I would have done the same thing. But if we're just walking through the neighborhood, and, to call the cops in to ask us to be moved along and the racial description, I think that was a bit much.
I want to talk more about education. Your focus, you said you've always been focused on education. It's a passion of yours. How do we get the schools as part of this equation with helping to stop some of this? Not just teaching whitewashed history, but helping open dialogue.
I think that's where it starts at, because when you come into the school system as a young child, and my preference is public, when you come into that system and you are opening your eyes to new people and new stories and new backgrounds, that's the moment in time to educate the youth, whether they be black, white, Hispanic, or whatever. That's your opportunity to educate them on what has taken place, who each individual is, what their backgrounds are, and, how far we've come. And I think that we have not done that. I went to Bates Middle School, Annapolis High School. I went to several elementary schools. My family moved around a bunch when I was young. But within those two systems, it was extremely diverse, and I think that's what made me, part of what I am today. When I went to Slippery Rock University my first semester, the part of the reason I left was because there was no diversity in the classroom. There was no opportunity for individuals to share their stories or their backgrounds, or help me educate myself on what this world would be like. Really quickly, I'll just get to a quick story. Our teacher brought in a book on Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me. We were talking about social justice and the issues that were taking place at that time, like Michael Brown. And a student, I was the only black student in that class of like 34. White student raised his hand and he asked the teacher, asked her, what is your job? And she said, I'm an English teacher. And he said, well, you should do that and you should stop teaching us race. And I would never, ever forget that moment. And I would never forget that teacher. She pulled me to the side, and she actually later gave me two books by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And moments like that, I think, just make you realize how important it is to share backgrounds with each other, and how important it is to understand what your neighbor is going through, poverty, racial issues, or even if there are issues with wealth and the stress that comes with that, and, the mental stigma that plays and that is also like hidden with wealth. Those are true issues, but it also brings us together, and I think that's kind of what we're missing, and that's kind of what we're realizing now with so many allies coming out all across the world.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole, talking today with Alderman DaJuan Gay, representing Ward 6 of the fine city of Annapolis. By the way, 2019 you won your write-in campaign at age 22. What's next?
I have no idea. I love this council. It is something that I've always dreamed of, and it's given me everything. My colleagues are like family, although, from Facebook it seems like we don't like each other. I really do. I love them because you spend so much time with them and you get to know what they are interested in and what they like and their background and how they got to the city and how they got to where they are. And so, I would hope to be a part of that. I don't know. I haven't really made up my mind yet on running again. I've told myself I'd give myself until after we come back from the August recess.
Tell me, what are some considerations?
Well, I think that it's important for me to get my education. So whether that be continuing it at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore or, just figuring out that path, I think that that's critical because the council is nice and it will always be there, but the council doesn't pay anything. So, I've got to start looking ahead. And so I think that finding that balance, committing myself to that education, like I said, is critical. It's important. And it's something that I committed to and that I committed to my constituents. So, just finding that balance. And so that's kind of what's going through my head.
How are you going to change the systemic racism? How are you going to change in public housing, in loans that we saw, in education, in every aspect of our society? How do you change all this?
Yeah, well, I'll use Ward 6 in Annapolis as an example. We look at communities that we have now seen through articles and through, lawsuits that have not been, kind of just finished yet. But
of which your mother's part of one, yes?
She is a part of one. We've seen that there have been, allegations of disparities in these communities, and that they've been overlooked in it and not been invested in. And so what is important now is that we take the financing and that we shift it. That's where the term, I don't even want to say it on.
I know, because it's getting a lot of people on edge, so go ahead and say it.
Yeah, it triggered people. That's where the term defund the police comes from. Because you look at a budget in the city of Annapolis where it's $21 million going to the police department, and you look at what we've done where we barely snipped away $1 million, $899,000 of that. That's an estimate. I have to get exact numbers on that. But you were trying to shift that funding to community resources, putting it into education that we've talked about, providing internships for high school students in the mayor's office so that they can work in the Department of Public Works and pick up a trade if they do not feel that they are prepared for college, or so that they can work in the city attorney's office and gain the skills necessary for law school if they feel that that is their next step. Providing that equal opportunity to residents from underserved communities is critical. And speaking of that, it's also critical that, you provide the resources through economic opportunities. We have to make sure that we provide jobs, that we provide resources for small businesses. That's all critical. And, I think that what we've seen out of this COVID-19 is that through the increase in unemployment benefits and stimulus, is that when you give people money, they make opportunities. People have been creating makeshift businesses and getting themselves established. People have been investing in their education and, their futures. So when we provide equal opportunities, when we invest, I think that's, the initial step. That's, I hope, what we're on the brink of in Annapolis. And I definitely hope that's what we're starting in terms of housing. Because that's critical, because if you don't have a clean place to live in, a place that is not free of mold, a place that doesn't provide air conditioning and the essentials of living, I don't think that any of that is possible because you're distracted by the social constraints. So, we've got a long way to go. And I just think that by just, shifting the focus and starting the conversation and acknowledging that, yes, these communities need attention, and that's the first step.
Well, there you have it. Alderman Gay, thank you very much for joining me on this week's 1430 Connection.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate giving me the opportunity. And, I'm thankful for my constituents for giving me this opportunity, and I won't take it for granted.
This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We will see you next week.